Recovering from Religion is a global non-profit organization that offers hope, healing and support to those who've been harmed by religion. We'd like to welcome you to RfR Stories Australia, a podcast series where we interview people who have transitioned out of religion and give them adequate space to share their stories in more detail. In this podcast series, we occasionally touch on highly sensitive topics, so listener discretion is advised. Also, any opinions or views expressed on the podcast are those of individuals and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoint of RfR in general. We hope you enjoy the program. Just a special note, dear listeners, that today's interview with Chrissie Foster touches on the highly sensitive topic of child sexual assault, and listener discretion is advised. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Recovering from Religion Stories Australia. We have a very, very exciting episode for you today. And so just before we dive into that, I'd like to introduce everyone who's in the room. My name is Sean. I'm one of the hosts of this program, and I'm joined by a few co-hosts today. First, we have Sally Ann dialing in from Perth. Hi, Sally Ann. How are you?
Hi, Sean. I'm well, thank you. Keeping warm here in Perth.
Wonderful. Good to have you again hosting together. And also, we're joined by Sherry as another co-host. Hi, Sherry.
Hello. How are you?
Good, thanks. So just for our audience, many of them may not have met you yet, Sherry, because we haven't done your interview. So I guess we can take this moment to promise that you will be interviewed sometime soon so they can all get to know you. But for those who are not aware, Sherry is on the board of Recovering from Religion Australia, and pretty much is it right to say you're the founder of RfR Australia? Is that a fair statement?
I'll claim it. I'll claim it and say yes. I started the first support group in Sydney in April 2020.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. So we'll for the time being, we won't tell your story, but we'll promise to our audience that you'll be joining us soon, and we look forward to that interview.
Sure.
And then today we're very privileged and excited to be joined by Chrissie Foster. Chrissie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. Good to be here.
So just to give an introduction, Chrissie, I'm going to sort of present what is my understanding of your bio so that people can know who you are in a nutshell. Obviously, the remainder of this interview will be so that they can get to know you in more detail. But please feel free to correct anything I say in this bio, and I'm basing some of this on your Wikipedia page. So Chrissie Foster is an Australian advocate for people impacted by child sexual abuse and is a public servant. So Chrissie has been extensively involved in this activity and has written 2 books. The first is Hell on the Way to Heaven, where Chrissie walks through her own personal experience and her family's experience as victims of child sexual assault, her children being the victims, and how that impacted their family and played out over their lives and the consequences of that. And then the second book Chrissie wrote much later on was Still Standing, where she speaks a lot more about the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. And that book is more focused on, as I understand it, as I read it, the bigger picture and how things have played out in Australia as more inquiries have been done on a government level, and how that impacted especially the Catholic Church, which is your background and what you're most familiar with. Is that a pretty accurate top-level summary, Chrissie?
Yes, it is, but I'm not a public servant. I was a public servant for 10 years, but then we had our own business.
Okay, right. And just in terms of the timeline, Chrissie, you've spent a lot of time in your life doing advocacy, of course, for victims of child sexual assault. But would I also be right in saying that you're sort of semi-retired at this point?
Yes, it's been a long time and a big effort. And I just feel as though so much has been achieved in the last don't know, I've been doing this for 28 years now, but I think the Royal Commission was the apex of all of our efforts, Anthony and mine and all the other advocates and activists who were trying to get something done about this. So it was a huge, fantastic achievement.
Wonderful. Well, we will definitely be covering your commentary on the Royal Commission, and we have all obviously read your work and have lots of questions when we get there. But before we get to that segment where we ask those more broad or general questions about the recent past, we actually would love to give you time in this interview to tell your own story, even going way back to the beginning of your childhood and being raised in the Catholic Church and what that was like. So if that's a good starting point for you, then please tell us, sort of open-ended question, what was it like to be raised Catholic in Australia at the time you were raised?
Well, it's a good place to start because it has affected my upbringing, Catholic family, Catholic education, going to church every Sunday was all expected, and that was life. And it was, I don't know, you just brought up on things about God and how important the priest is, and they had a lot of emphasis on our own sins, especially in grade 2, where we had our first confession and first Holy Communion. So in grade 2, we are 7 years old. So in that year, as part of learning about confession and sinfulness, we were told how there were sinful parts of our body which would make us virtually go to hell for sins. And the nun never said what part of the body was so sinful. So it was just a big question mark. And there were paintings, posters up on the wall, pictures of hell. And it had people there begging for mercy and their children at their knees begging for mercy, and them all burning. And that's what would happen to us if we sinned. And, that we were told that no one will give you any water in that fiery place. So that was what we were taught. And I guess after that, it was never really discussed again. But you'd already been taught it, so you knew that it was there and the consequences. And all of this is told to 7-year-olds and younger and older. And, at that age, all children believe in the Tooth Fairy and Father Christmas and the Easter Bunny, so you believe it, you really believe it. And I think that's what's so wrong with it, that, they get in children's head at that young age. It's not a mature age thing where you can read the Bible and then decide. We were never even looked at the Bible until I was in secondary school. It was all their interpretation of what the Bible said. And also we had a catechism. So instead of a Bible, we had a catechism, which was question, answer. They asked the question and they answered it. And that's what we had to learn off by rote, off by heart. We had to recite all these things. So that was the education. And also at that same year, grade 2, one child asked a question, and this is how rare asking a question was. This boy asked the nun, why don't priests marry? And the nun said, oh, well, priests have special blessings, so they don't have to get married. Now, I never thought about that. It just became a fact. It just became reality, or that was that. That was why priests didn't get married. But I never thought of that again until I found out about my eldest child being sexually abused by the priest. It was like a big blank. It was a big, I don't know. They had a special blessing, so they didn't have to get married. So therefore, they didn't have sex because they had special blessings. And I was 40 years old before I thought, oh, yeah, this is a man with a penis. It's he's never had sex. It was just so stupid. And but that was the entanglement of my thinking and everybody's thinking, I guess, who'd been brought up that way, because some voodoo had happened that no, they don't have sex, and you never question that ever until that happened. So it was sort of like deceitfulness. It's really a bad thing. So move on. Got married to Anthony. So,
I was just going to say maybe we could reflect some of that as we move on. So I actually had maybe two questions about that. I don't know if Sherry or Zalian might have any follow-on questions, but the first is for those who don't come from a Catholic background. What is the Catechism? What's the significance of this book for Catholics?
Okay, it's just a book of questions and answers, and it starts off, I think it starts off, who made the world? And the answer is God made the world. And there's probably about 300 of those questions. I've got the book over there. Did you want to?
Yeah.
Sure. We can look at the cover at least. I don't think
we don't want to go through all 300. No.
Yes.
Wow.
That's
right.
Catechism for the Catholic Church, and that's how big it is.
Wow.
It's just
so it's basically a statement of doctrines, right? The questions are questions.
Yeah. So this is probably an updated version from when this is June 94. We were back in the 60s. So, that would have been a study one that's so big, but for the school, it would have been a lot smaller and I guess more basic.
Okay. And then just a question about the role of confession and sinfulness. So for those who come from other religious backgrounds, it might be surprising to realize just how much this is drummed into a Catholic, that confession is something that is it something you're required to do on a regular basis?
Oh, yes, at school it is, yeah. Well, when we were at primary school, was regular. I don't know whether it was weekly or monthly, I'm not sure. But the whole class had to go in, go to confession with the priest, and we had to be taught beforehand the words, and what we had to say was always the same words apart from your sins. And it really was sort of ridiculous, because what sins do children have? And,
exactly.
Yeah, and 7-year-olds, I mean, back in, I think it was pre-1912, children made their first confession when they were 14. And then the Pope at that time changed it to 7. So it was 14, 15. So, I don't know. It's just to, enslave people, I think, so that they don't have a choice, so they can't think. I remember the nun teaching us that the priest wasn't interested in who you were. He didn't look at you. He didn't identify you. It was anonymous. But I found when I went to confession, every single time the priest would look and see who it was. It was a very thin veil there, and then the mesh. And but every time I could see him look me in the eye and see who I was, identify me. So this one time I thought, I'm going to hide from him so he can't identify me. Anyway, I went to great lengths to hide in the confessional box, and he went to great lengths to see me. So I was going further and further and further away, and then closer and closer to the wall. And I ended up almost scraping my face the wall because he kept going further and further down, almost putting his head on his knees, looking up to see who it was.
Wow.
So, I don't know. It was awful. I used to hate going to confession. I think every child did. We used to just say the same thing every time. And you know, once I took 5 cents of my mum's or sixpence, and I thought, oh, I've got a sin. So I thought, oh, that's good.
Got something to say.
Got something to actually say now,
I've
something
been lying
legitimate.
all the time, yeah. So I had something to say. So it almost encourages, maybe with some kids, to do something wrong. So you got something to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Strikes me as the word that keeps coming into my head is gaslighting, because
yes.
it's forcing you into this position of you can't. It always has to be a sin. Like it's a problem. There has to be some issue that you have to bring up, right? It's not like you can go to confession and I've just had a really good day and I don't. It's putting you in that headset straight off that you have to find something wrong, that you are inherently sinful, right? And the power play of that, and to do that to children,
I know. It's so wrong, really is. But another thing about that, you know, it's almost like blackmail, because you've got confession, and who's the only person who can hear your confession? The priest.
The priest. Yeah.
So part of being a Catholic is you have to go to Mass every Sunday, and unless you're sick, you have to go. So if you miss Mass, that's a big sin. And then if you die before going to confession, you don't go to heaven, you know, go to hell. So who's the only person who can say the Mass? The priest. So they've taken God and got like a copyright on him by saying the only way you are going to go to heaven is to go through the priest, the confession and Mass. And they've got it all stitched up. And these are rules that they made themselves.
Yep.
So they've taken this religion, this mass of people, of Catholics, and controlling them and keeping them in line, and just so they can go to heaven. And it's just horrendous, the blackmailing and the containing of all these people by forcing them into, you know, the only way you're going to get to heaven is through us, because we are God, basically.
Yep.
Wow. From my present perspective, I find what you've described about the Catholic confession process deeply disturbing. We find this in many religious backgrounds. We come from different religions, and they have something similar built into them. And the idea is really that the religion, and especially the atonement of Jesus Christ, Jesus dying for you to save you from your sins, it's often positioned as this kind of healing balm that you will receive from the church, from Jesus. Then you look underneath the cover, and the so-called healing balm that's supposed to heal you and soothe you and forgive you, the very same set and sinful. And it's a profound journey to just get rid of the whole thing.
Well, I think that confession teaching in that at that age leads to Catholic guilt. Probably heard that term.
Yeah.
Everything we do is wrong. And I remember my dad, who's not a Catholic, asked me when I was about, I don't know, 12 or 11 or something. He said, "Oh, do you like being a Catholic?" And straight away I answered him, which was out of character. No, because everything I say and do is a sin. That was out of a kid, because it was just like that. You know, you couldn't do anything right. There was no sort of praise of you or anything. You know, it was like a pecking order, and your kids were right at the bottom.
Mm, yeah. That's awful.
Yep. And it just strikes me that a lot of people think that religion is benign, but when you start, and especially the mainstream religions, the big ones out there, people will say that, oh, that as long as they're not doing anything to hurt anyone else. But when you start to dig into it, when you start to look at the teachings and the indoctrination and the methods of control, you then start to realize how much harm religion causes. And what you've just described to children, that's trauma. That's trauma.
Mm.
Yeah, it was traumatic, yeah. Yeah, that confession. Yeah, I was traumatized by it. Never liked going to confession my whole life. But just use the Catholic Church rules are you have to go at least once a year. So when I found that out, I used to go once a year.
Right. The minimum required. Yeah. Yeah. The confession concept and this infrastructure is it really co-opts, as you said, the ordinary human emotion of guilt, and then just really distorts and blows it out so that you're just feeling guilty about everything. And I'm sure maybe you could speak to it, but I'm sure many of us have gone through the same journey where we're now leaving religion. Part of our recovery process is to rehabilitate our own relationship with guilt, because our tendency will be to feel guilty and apologize for pretty much everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and true. That Sherry, you mentioned the control, and I think that's what's behind a lot of it is the control, but also they elevate themselves. I don't know if you've heard or not, but when a priest is ordained, he becomes ontologically changed. So he becomes like a new being, and he's above other men and above the angels and just below God. And this is what they teach us and what they believe. So that all ties in with our worthlessness and their, godliness, that they're just short of God. So when all this, erupts with the sex crimes, it sort of splits everyone, because how could that be true? How could that be possible? And and it alienates people like myself and victims, because they have placed themselves so high in society that they're untouchable.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
well, before we move on, sorry, I was just going to say, before we move on to sorry, Thaliane, you go ahead.
Okay. Delay here. I was just going to say it's having had a few years in the Catholic Church in my early childhood, a lot of what you're saying there, Chrissie, I remember as you're saying it, some of it's coming back to me going into the confessional box. I can actually still smell the smell of what that was like, the wood in the confessional box, and that sort of level of sort of feeling uncomfortable in there. But I think what strikes me through what you're saying and my own memories of the Catholic Church is this, that the priest it was like the priest took the place of Jesus. It was like there was this, it was almost like we didn't need Jesus. Jesus was kind of secondary. There was the priest who was the one who held the authority and held the power. And growing up in Catholic Ireland, the priest was just like, there was nobody higher than priest. It was like he was the most senior, he was superior and infallible in that sense. And the power that the priest had was just incredibly, I mean, it's just amazing just to see the power that the priesthood had in Ireland. And not just in the Catholic Church, but obviously in the country as well, culturally.
Yeah.
But you can see how that could happen and how they can take over, because Jesus is silent. Apart from the
That's
Bible,
right.
and he said 2,000 years ago, he's gone, you know.
Mm.
But these guys
Mm.
are still wielding the power in the guise of him. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's very deceptive.
very much so. Mm.
Okay, so before we move on from your upbringing and childhood in the Catholic Church, is there anything else you would like to say about your childhood in the church, or any other questions that the panel has for you before we move on?
No, I think I've said a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, that's fine.
I think you've described it very articulately. Like you've given a really good image of what it was like for you growing up in that environment. And it sounds, as I like the word that Sean used, actually, disturbing, really disturbing. But
Deeply disturbing.
yeah, but it does also paint the picture of what we know is going to come, what we know you're going to be sharing with your story, and the power that the religion had in your life and in the lives of your family. So yeah, it's given me a good idea of your background there. Thank you for sharing that. You made some really powerful comments.
Thanks, Sherry. Thank you.
Actually, I have one last question for you, Chrissy. At any point in your childhood at the Catholic Church, did you attend a Catholic school as well?
Yes, I
Yeah,
attended Catholic primary school and secondary school.
yeah. Was there any point that you really felt safe there, or was it always some kind of underlying level of discomfort?
Oh, I felt safe. I didn't feel threatened because nothing had ever happened to me in the school environment. Was just, you know, this background guilt all the time. It was never talked about, you know, the priest and not getting married or priest and sex. It was, you know, the thinking was if you even thought that or said something like that, you know, you'd get struck down by lightning.
Yeah.
No one said anything like that. No one ever mentioned anything like that. It was just like a taboo subject that you did not go there. And that little boy in grade 2 who asked about them getting married, even for its time, it was like an interesting question, and he was very brave to ask it because, you know, they used to have the strap. They'd give you the strap if you did something wrong or, you know, didn't shut the door, you get the strap. And so they wielded a lot of power. So you didn't ask questions, which was another bad thing. No one was ever encouraged to ask questions. And I still have that problem now. So I'm always on the back foot and, oh, I must have done something. But you don't ask a question because you're not allowed to. And that also affected me with my girls at primary school. So it's just toxic. It debilitates you as an adult even to even look after your own children. Yeah, dreadful. And out in society, you know, you're like the doormat for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean,
that really powerfully.
the fact that that little boy asking that question had made such an impact on you that you remember it so clearly says in itself how foreign it was. You must have sat there as a little girl shocked that he dared to speak up and say something. I can just imagine how uncomfortable you would have felt that, oh, someone's asked a question, that's impacted on you, that so many years later, that's a story that you share now.
Well, it was a rare thing. We were allowed to sit down in our first communion or first confession class, and it was the same year, but first comes the confession. We're allowed to ask questions, and that's what stood out for me, that we were allowed to ask questions. And then that boy asked that. That's the only question I remember. And yeah, it's so weird that it stuck in my mind all these years. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that speaks volumes.
Something else I was going to say, but I've forgotten now. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. No worries. So it seems the scene is set from your childhood. We have this environment, and I think we have a clear picture of the unique combination of fear. We haven't talked about it, but the fear of punishment, the fear of being told off for asking the wrong questions, and the stifling of healthy curiosity or skepticism. And so that set the scene for us to now go into your adulthood. So where do we go from there?
Oh, well, yeah, just got married in 1980 and to a wonderful man, Anthony. He was not a Catholic, but I had to bring the children up as Catholic because otherwise I wouldn't go to heaven. And the easiest way, I guess, for that is to send your children to a Catholic primary school, which I insisted upon. Anthony wanted to send them to the local state school. So anyway, they went to the Catholic school, and that's where it all happened.
Okay, so it is a very big story to approach, and so you obviously go through this story in great detail in Hell on the Way to Heaven. But as I understand it, the starting point is that firstly, there was an era that they were in school where there were no suspicions on your or anyone else's end, but that something was already happening. Is that right?
Yes. We didn't find out until years after. I think Amy was in grade 6, my youngest, and Katie and Emma were in secondary school. That we found out through a court case that the priest who'd retired a couple of years earlier was up on charges. So that was a great shock to hear that. And I'd heard and seen little articles in the local papers about it. And then one day I went out and got the Saturday newspaper, the Saturday Herald Sun, and just walking up the steps here, I opened it up and there was Father O'Donnell. His face was on the front page of the paper, looking like this, and he'd pleaded guilty to 31 years of sexually assaulting children from for 31 years backwards from 1977. So from the 1930s, 1940s, sorry, right through to 1977. So it was just horrifying to see that on the front page of the newspaper in my front yard. And I just went inside because suddenly it was a whole, Emma was there, all the kids of all the parents we knew, all the kids that played with my kids over a decade, and all went to school together, and we all went there every day to pick up our kids and drop them off. And this was going on just before he got to Oakley, or just overlapping 1 year into Oakley. So did that mean he stopped in 1977? But why would he stop? It was just like torture in the thinking. And anyway, so that was Saturday morning. And then Sunday, I went to church Sunday morning. And by this stage, I was feeling, so upset and distressed about what I'd read in the paper, because it went into detail. It was boys and girls he was offending against. I knew he liked Emma because he didn't like girls, but he liked Emma. So that was a worry. to me, because I thought, oh, he sort of treated girls with disdain, not even sort of seeing them actually. But it really worried me. Anyway, I went to church next morning and just went in, and everyone's sort of seated, and I thought, oh, the priest will say something during Mass. And this was in 1996, and O'Donnell had retired in mid-1992. So it was like four years later, and here he is about to go to jail. And I thought, oh, the priest will say something during the homily or when he can speak. And so I sort of waited and waited. It didn't even say a word, didn't crack a mention that the previous priest was going to jail for raping kids for 31 years, and yet no one said a word. He didn't say a word. He was the leader of our church, and he said nothing. And then I went out at the end of Mass, because that distressed me even more. Went out after Mass, and there's all people standing around. By that stage, I was 40, so there were a lot of older people there, senior parishioners, and they were all standing around, they were chatting, and so it was, we're going on a picnic or something. There was nothing. Where's the worry? This man had been in Oakley at this church with these children at the primary school for 17 years, and 31 earlier years he'd pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting children. So, I just looked around, everyone's just smiling, chatting and laughing, and I thought, oh, am I going insane? Am I nuts? I sort of slinked around the corner, and just around the corner of the church was a group of other mothers like myself, and they were all sort of pale and just looking shocked. And then we were just sort of talking desperately about it, about the newspaper, about what he did, what it said, what he'd done. And we were sort of whispering because no one else, it wasn't reality for anyone else. And it really blew my mind. I thought, what is wrong with them? But this is their tactics, I'll just ignore it or don't say anything. And even the priest, when we told this same guy didn't say anything in Mass, months later when we found out about Emma, we rang him. He came round to our house, and he was sympathetic about, this had happened to Emma. And then as we were walking up the hallway here and he was leaving, Anthony and I were behind him, he was in front, and he didn't turn around. He just said, oh, don't tell anybody. And we just looked at each other, and I got really angry. And when he left, I turned around and started ringing people. It was, that's, they're all company men. There's no concern about me or my child. It was just, oh, shut up about it. Don't say anything. And of course, they've said that for centuries to parents who find this out. That's how they keep going without any, accountability or anything. This is how they operate. Yeah.
The protection of the church is more important than protection of children.
Absolutely. But there's something in between there. There's something where the ones who weren't offending could have got rid of those guys. Okay, don't tell the police, don't tell the media, but get rid of them. They never did that. It's something I still don't understand, this protection by those in the hierarchy who weren't offenders, unless they were, I don't know. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just say, on the quiet, we don't want people like you here. We don't want people like you. Goodbye. And that's it. A scandal, get rid of them. But they don't. Never did. Never did.
Yeah.
Did you ever get any insight, Chrissie, into why that might be? Like any insight or understanding around why they would not have done that?
Well, I think part of it is blackmail about their own sexual offending. A lot of clergy are homosexual, which is no big deal, doesn't worry me, but you know, they say it's a sin, so they can't be seen to be doing that. So I think there's a fair bit of that goes on. And then they've got their rules and regulations, which have, you know, loopholes in them, their canon law, which has loopholes that they can lay aside a priest for sexual assault of a child under 16 if the case warrants it. But who decides that? They do. And also that's one of the punishments. So they have to decide which punishment. Is it that one or another one? So they take another one. So it all works their way to, you know, keep it under the lid, and not do the right thing, which they chose not to do.
Can I make an observation that, so we will probably spend a lot of time talking about the hierarchy and their awareness of the problem, their awareness of the scale of the problem, and their lack of appropriate response. That much is very clear, and we'll definitely be focusing. And of course, the Royal Commission focused on that. But I have another point to make, which is really clear from the story that you've told, which is as you walked out the door and you saw everyone having more or less a happy picnic, it's that very thick layer of, we might call, moderate believers, or you know, naive to the problem and not really interested in looking, or they don't have the free attention looking. That layer, it's like in the middle of the ball we have the hierarchy and their protection and their knowledge, but then surrounding this you have this thick layer of adherents, believers, who through their own in essence naivete, which is also a result of the silence that, so they never become aware of the problem in the first place, the lack of critical thinking or investigation. They are this thick layer that protects the hierarchy. And if every one of those people were to go the way you went, then the hierarchy might just die out, because there's no funding, there's no interest, there's just complete rejection. And I think we don't often talk about that, but that layer, that very, very thick layer of moderate believers, your everyday good people who just go to church on Sunday and who confess, in a very subtle way, they are protecting the hierarchy. And financially, it's pretty clear that they're protecting them too by their donations.
Well,
And so the moment you walked out there, you realized, like, I'm feeling really distressed about this news, but no one here seems to be bothered at all by it, not even thinking about it and turning away from it.
No, well, I think what happened was a bit of stuff went on beforehand, because, like I said, I saw little snippets in the newspaper, the local papers, that sort of led up to his being on the front page of the major newspaper. And that was, it was gathering cases, I suppose, of where he worked. They'd put it in the local paper so people would come forward. But so that was going on in the background until it was his court case. So in that period, I remember hearing about O'Donnell, and that he pleaded guilty, although he's not. So that was the thing in the parish. I was one of the parishioners, and this was coming from the older parishioners, and one of them said it to me, and he sort of said it in a holy and reverent way. Oh, he pleaded guilty even though he wasn't guilty. And I thought, oh, why would you do that? And he said, oh, well, he wanted to save these people who were saying these things, making the accusations. He wanted to spare them. And it just totally made no sense. It was nonsense. Because why would a priest plead guilty as in a court of law, so lie to a court of law about people falsely accusing him of things? Why would you protect liars? And this was what he said. and they swallowed it hook, line and sinker. So they didn't believe he was guilty. It's easier to believe this garbage that he pleaded guilty even when he wasn't, than the reality of him raping children at Oakley, at everywhere he went.
That's cognitive dissonance there. That's squaring a circle in a way that they can somehow justify continuing to support the church. You know, listening to your comments there has made me reflect on my own background, which is with the Jehovah's Witnesses, who also have a significant issue with child sexual abuse. Whenever I can observe exactly the same thing, right? But in trying to sort of understand why that environment perpetuates, I would like your thoughts on this. In the Jehovah's Witnesses, if anybody speaks out about something that's negative about the religion, that's borderline apostasy, and you don't do that. You do not speak out about the church or the religion in a negative way. If something has happened, if there is a problem, it is to be dealt with within the religion itself. They have their own judicial processes, and you have to work through forgiving whatever has happened. It has to be managed within. And if you can't forgive, there's a problem with your faith. It's an issue that you've got. I can remember as a child, there was a Watchtower article about rape, and they glorified women who could forgive the rapist. And I remember sitting there as a child thinking, I don't think I could do that. Oh dear, that's something I've got to work on. That's a problem I've got.
But also you shouldn't.
Yes, I know.
Of course.
I know. But in that same headset as a child, when you are like just as you described, where you just take it as like these are the authoritarians in your world, right? And you don't question, you don't think that they're not telling you something true. And so with that construct, you think, well, I'm the one then that has to work through that. So you have this, it's a complex system, but there's all these moving parts to it where you've got the hierarchy, you've got the rule books, you've got the culture, you've got this, you can't speak out, there's this thing of secrecy. If you step out of line and you speak out about it, that's apostasy, which is the worst of the worst thing you can do. Could some of that also be in play with your experience and with the behaviour of the Catholic Church and what you have described you saw that day with your fellow parishioners?
That's a long question.
Sorry.
What I was thinking of in when you were speaking was so much of it's about power, about maintaining power and control over people. Without us ordinary people, there'd be no income for them, no money, no adoration, no nothing. So it's in their own interest to, stop these scandals and make you forgive people, make you not go to the police to get help on these issues. It's just containing it so they can control you, because why wouldn't you do any of that? The only other thing I can think of is that they're rapists themselves. That explains it too. There's possibilities on our side of the fence too. I don't know. It's and they hide behind God, but it's not good. It's not good. God is good. They're not good. Rape is not good, but I forgive them and you'll be good. So it's something. Maybe it's misogyny that, every religion just about in the world is based on women being downtrodden. So that would play into it as well. Control freaks, I don't know. People who have to be in charge and, sociopaths. psychopaths, people like that,
Mm.
gravitate to there, just the way pedophiles gravitate to child employment sort of thing, jobs. Like O'Donnell was never promoted, because if he was promoted, he'd be out of a parish. Every parish he went to, he had 300, 400, 500 children to molest.
There's
Sorry, Sean. We all have so many questions for you, Chrissie. Chrissie, I think if we could take a bit of a bit of a detour in a way to, I'd like to, if it's okay with everybody, if it's okay with you, Chrissie, I'd like to hear about your children. I'd love to hear about your daughters, and what they were like as children, and what it was like being their mum as they were growing up, and then how the impacts of what happened to them on you and your family, if you're okay to talk about that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I had 3 lovely, healthy little girls, 3 under the age of 3.5. So it was a very, very busy time. They were just gorgeous. I brought them up to, obey, which really grates, because they had to obey him, what he was doing. So I just think it's like some sort of setup that I've been tricked into anyway. But they are really good girls, and I was very proud of them. They, we did lots of things, travelled, and all the activities you do, sporting things. So they had a very normal upbringing. Had to go to church every Sunday. Then it all went wrong, so it was mostly destroyed. Yeah.
And so they went to, as you said, a Catholic school. Just to kind of have an understanding, so O'Donnell was the parish priest,
Yes.
and the school was connected to the parish.
Well, they join each other. There's always, in a Catholic setup, usually, unless it's remote or somewhere, there's the church, the school, and the presbytery. And it's like a centre, and they're all sort of next door or just around the corner from each other. They're all very close. So there was the church where the priest was meant to be, and then there was a separate primary school, but he used to go in the primary school all the time and take boys out of the school to do jobs. There was always boys doing jobs for him. So he was always there. I don't know, just infiltrated. No one asked any questions, none of the teachers, because he was always there and he was in charge. He could hire or fire any of the school teachers or the school principal. So you did what Father O'Donnell said. He says jump, you say how high. So that was his position, which was very high up.
He was idolized by everybody within the parish, within the school.
Yeah, he was, an angry, nasty little man. I think most of us hoped he'd move on or die or something, and we'd get a better priest. But that's another thing in Catholic Church. You don't get to choose who your priest is. Not even back then. You were sent a priest. The Anglican Church interview clergy, and they choose one to be their priest. But we never got that. You could get a drunk or whatever. But you just got what was given. That was it. No entering into it.
It's not a democracy, that's for sure.
Not at all. No, it's a dictatorship.
I know I really appreciate your openness and your willingness to discuss these horrific. I it, I cannot imagine your fear and your horror, and then finding out that it was true. I, it, I think if we can, I don't think we need to agonize on that point, but what I would like to sort of get more into is how you harnessed that. I loved in Still Standing that you spoke about your rage, and that rage fueled you and motivated you to do all that you then did.
Yes, it sustained me. It was a force that just paved the way for action. My husband was very good at speaking, so he did most of the speaking. But yeah, just the total opposite to what we'd all been brought up to believe and live that life where, we were going to hell if we missed Mass on Sunday. O'Donnell and others of them were raping children for decades, and that's fine, doesn't matter. And that was their attitude. Their actions speak louder than their words. And while we were being condemned to hell and burning for all eternity, he was welcome to rape kids. I mean, what the hell? What's wrong with them? What the hell is wrong with them? And I'm using good language at the moment, but, just the hypocrisy of it is totally unbelievable. When I talk about this, I'm talking about the hierarchy. I'm not talking about the billion parishioners. I was one of them. We were kept in the dark about all this. We were the victim pool, so they weren't telling us. So when I talk about all this, I'm talking about the hierarchy, who knew all about it and did nothing.
Yeah. So coming back to the chronology of how this all unfolded, so just so that we have our timeline clear, the time of that your two children were assaulted, during that time you actually had no awareness throughout the entire era of the assault. Is that correct? And then
that's correct.
O'Donnell had retired and left, and then only years later you saw the newspaper article and then actually started to ask questions, and that's when things started to unravel. Of course, there were signs which you retrospectively understood as you learned the truth. You went back, for example, I think was it Emma who would have the anger headaches that you describe. So there were things that, in retrospect, or the Coke, the really really scary phrase that Coke makes me drunk. So there were things that you understood, but it was only retrospective. Is that correct?
That's correct. They were question marks. They were oddities. I think in the first book I called them oddities, and I went through them all to give other parents a chance at identifying such behaviour or oddities and to ask questions, because that's one thing I didn't do, or I did and I got a brush off. But I should have pursued it to find out what was behind what they said. But, I don't know, I didn't. So, and that was part of, I think, you don't ask questions, that sort of philosophy, because that was my whole upbringing, not asking questions. Right. Sometimes I did, and I got just a brush off answer. Yeah.
So going with the timeline now, you reach a point where you're starting to ask very serious questions and piece together an understanding of what might have happened. And now there's an entire era of your story where you're basically in a discovery phase. And it's accompanied by confessions from your children at different points in time. Is that correct?
Yes, it was over a
Um,
long period.
yeah. Yeah, I was just going to sort of invite you to share whatever you'd like to share about that process here. I know one of the interesting things we have in this interview is that you have, again, shared all of this at book length. So that we'll just keep telling our audience for all the full details, please go buy the book because it's an excellent read and harrowing. But in terms of this interview, I'd like to invite you to share as much as you'd like to share about how that discovery phase unraveled. When and where did the confessions happen, and then what happened after that?
Well, it started with my eldest daughter, Emma, becoming anorexic. And then she became suicidal and depressed as well. So she ended up in going to a adolescent psych unit, and she was in and out of there for months, I suppose. And then one of her admissions, she'd said that the priest took her into a room and sexually assaulted her. So that's when we found out what was wrong with her and who it was. So, and that was just horrifying to find that out. It was, just, I couldn't believe how bad it was to find that out. It was like the whole life suddenly just gets ripped apart because you didn't see anything like that. And also, how could someone do that? And when did it happen? And, it was happening at school away from us. So we didn't see anything. I used to go to the school, take them to the school and then be there before they got out to take them home to protect them, Yet what was happening to them so bad was happening in the school during school hours where I wasn't allowed to be. And this is what was going on. So this, I don't know, things started coming back to me. Like Emma used to say, well, Coke makes me drunk. And O'Donnell used to give out Coke to the boys mainly. The girls didn't get it because he didn't like girls. So he'd give it to the boys in front of the girls and they just miss out. So suddenly I thought, she used to say that as a little child. And one time she even, she wasn't saying it to me, she was saying it to other kids and they were all laughing and joking about it. That's probably why I just thought not a lot about it. And she'd never had Coke, so I don't know what she was talking about. I thought maybe it was just lemonade or she had it somewhere else at, party or something. And then one day she sort of acted out that, oh, Coke makes me drunk. And her little cousin said, no, it doesn't. She said, yes, it does. So he gave her a little sip. And then she went, reeling around and round and round, and then collapsed in a heap on the floor. And the cousins were following her. They were all younger than her. And then one of them poked her and she jumped up and said, oh, and raced off, and they all went off laughing. But she'd been acting out what had actually happened, I suppose, this is, and this is what he'd been doing, was drugging her. So it was all horrifying. It was absolutely gut-wrenching and horrifying.
Yeah.
And it's partly where my rage came from. How are you supposed to douse that? Why would you want to until something's done, as in protect other children or a bit of accountability or an admission of truth in all of this? So all these things fueled me to go on, and my husband to go on, and we went on and on and on until we got somewhere, which was wonderful. But that was just one of the things. I list them all in the book. Yeah, so that was Emma, and we found out about her. And then I think it was 17 months later, Kate was having problems or sleeping at night. I'd known that for a while, or she'd said, but I didn't know it was long term, but it was. She was suffering insomnia from the assaults that happened to her. And then when she was, I think, 14, she sort of locked herself in the room, and she was, really depressed, and she'd hardly speak to us. Anyway, she was writing something, and I found a suicide note in her room. And in that, she said that what happened to Emma happened to her as well by the priest lots of times. So it was then that I found out about her. So I got her into counselling, and so that went along. But Emma ended up taking drugs to forget about her trauma, and Katie started binge drinking to sort of forget her trauma. So a result of that was that after 10 years of being a drug addict, Emma suicided at 26 years of age, and Katie got drunk one night and got hit by a car when she was 15, and spent a year in hospital and still has 24-hour care. So all this also fueled my anger, because they had just walked away. They had just walked away from us, the damage they'd done, the ruined life, the hell we lived. I couldn't give a shit. So they had it coming.
Yeah.
And not giving a damn about anybody, not just us. Their actions meant they didn't care about any child who'd been raped by their priest. Any child, any family member, nothing. It was all just crush you. And that was something I found out and knew for sure when we met George Pell. We had a private meeting with him for half an hour, and then we had a group meeting, because all the neighbourhood parents who went to school with my children, we gathered together in a group to fight them. And then we ended up taking it to the local media, and had an article in the paper, and we had so many meetings and everything. So that accumulated or culminated in a meeting of George Pell, who was then Archbishop of Melbourne. So he came out to Oakley to see us. So we had a half-hour meeting with him at first. And in that meeting, I held hope for that meeting, that he would understand, that he would see that Emma was a good Catholic child, and that we were a good Catholic family, and that O'Donnell actually did this. And it was happening years after what he'd pleaded guilty to, pre-1977. So this was real, this was happening. You need to help the other children who were there at the school when O'Donnell was there. So this is what we wanted to present to him. And no kidding, everything we said, he just crushed us. He just trampled on us verbally. My husband, I did very little speaking, but everything my husband presented to him, he would just say, take your evidence to court, prove what you're saying. If you don't like what we are doing, go to court. That's his responses in that half hour. There was no point even speaking to the man. And I thought, well, I'd given him the benefit of the doubt that he would have some compassion, but no, nothing. He was an empty cell. And it was at that point that I think for both of us, Anthony and I, that started us on this mission to get some accountability, something from them to recognise what they'd done, because George Pell was void of any understanding of what was going on with children. And yeah, he was not going to fix the situation. He was part of the problem. He was just going to do a thing.
All of the evidence was very obviously pointing to them not listening and not engaging with your concerns.
And it was more than that. It was more than that. It was intentional. And, you know, with the Royal Commission, we found out, they knew all about it. They knew, and they did nothing.
They did nothing.
And they had all this infrastructure of sorting it out, shutting it down, shutting us up, when they need to deal with it. So that's what the Royal Commission showed, which was just proved us all right, what we've been saying. So that was something at least.
It truly is just, sorry, go Sally-Ann.
Oh, I was just going to say, as you were just speaking there, Chrissie, about that meeting with George Pell, there was something that you wrote in your book that really impacted me, and I think made this visual that you present of George Pell's foot being very close to your knee in that meeting. It so struck me and has stayed with me in the intimidation, the way he tried to intimidate by using his body to do that. So not just crushing you with his words and his lack of understanding and empathy, but this sort of physical intimidation that he used as this sort of, I am the person in charge here, I am the person in power, and he used everything available to him to communicate that to you and to Anthony. I loved your reaction that you actually said something to him. Can you sort of relay that? Because I loved how that sort of action that you took in that moment, to me, was just so powerful and profound.
Well, before the meeting, I gathered together all the proof that I was a good Catholic, you know, donations and this and that. And I had, you know, this hefty pile of stuff that I thought I'd show him. Anyway, when we got there to the meeting, we were shown into a little side room, which when we went in there, it was full of disused furniture. You know, it had old desks and tables and all sorts of things, chairs there. And then there was like a little hard timber bench seat and a big red leather chair, like an executive chair. So anyway, we were shown in there and we sat down on the little chair. I wish I had sat on the red chair. So anyway, we were waiting there and then the doorknob moved. The door was ajar a little bit, but the doorknob moved. And George Pell called out, "Are they friends?" Like that. And then a little squeaky voice came from way back, "Yes," like that. So that was the parish priest. And then he came in and sat in the chair. So anyway, he's sort of verbally attacking my husband, as my husband being very reasonable and logical, and George Pell's attacking everything he says to prove it. So I've got my stuff on my knee and I'm sort of so stressed out, you know, as Archbishop of Melbourne. I'm a, you know, trodden down Catholic, you know, this is, you know, enormous. So I've got this proof on my knee and I'm sort of there and there and there. And something was sort of irritating me. And, but I thought it was just a situation. Anyway, Pell's knee, he was cross-legged, George Pell's foot, I should say. he was cross-legged and sort of leaning back in this big red chair, and we were squashed up over there. Anyway, his toe was right near my knee, and subconsciously that is what I'd been trying to get away from, because my back, I kept pushing my back into this hard timber seat. So, and when I saw his foot there, I just was furious that his foot was there and we're all squashed up and he's attacking my good husband. And they were sort of arguing, and I just stopped the proceedings and I said, "Get your foot away from my knee." And they both stopped talking and looked at me. And then I pointed, I said, "Get your foot away from my knee." Anyway, he slowly undid his legs and sat up properly. But that was the only argument in the whole half hour that we won.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, there's just something incredibly powerful about that, about what you said, like the resistance there, the resistance in how you used whatever you could to let him know that he wasn't going to, he didn't have that authority over you. You weren't going to be coming under his power and sort of falling down in front of him as he expected you to do, I imagine.
Yeah. He did have a look on his face like he had hurt feelings, but I thought, no, it was just instantly angry that he was putting it through that. And the room, like it was a presbytery full of rooms and lounge rooms and things, meeting rooms, and they put us in this disused furniture room.
That's a power play. That's such a power play.
Yeah.
And at the door saying, "Are they friends?" Yelling it out, "Are they friends?" Like,
yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing. Yeah.
That's deliberate.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Yeah, just wanted to shut us down, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. No, if anything, it probably fueled it more so.
Yeah, well, there's only him to blame for the actions we took. For our activism was that night when I could see that he would not do one single thing for any child, any person. And what it meant is that we all meant nothing. We were all worthless in his eyes. And it was, I suppose, a defining moment to understand that we were nothing.
Yeah.
And he's the leader. He's in charge. He makes things happen. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. Wow.
Nothing good. I know he did the Melbourne response, but that was to benefit the church, to contain the payouts to, some people got $2,500. And the woman who got that couldn't read or write because she was abused as a child.
Well, maybe we can talk about that as the next chapter. So I'm just going to check in about where we are in the storyline, and then we can talk about that because, as I understand it, that's significant in your journey too. So we're at the point where you're seeking some acknowledgement and accountability from George Pell, from the Catholic hierarchy, and you're getting none, and that has fueled your anger, and so something is now flipped for you, and now you're fully engaged in this process. You've had your awakening, as it were. You've realized the enormity of the problem that you're facing, and the fact that they will never do anything. They hadn't for a long time, and they weren't going to. And then you were starting to now familiarize yourself with what actions they were taking, for example, the Melbourne response. So if you don't mind, I'll just explain my understanding of what the Melbourne response is. Maybe you can correct it. But basically, as the church understood that there's a problem, but they wanted to contain it and not have it go through the legal systems and get complicated and expensive. So they just set up, as it were, their own private, a little bit more than a hotline, but basically, you call in and make the complaint, and then they will get sort of case officers, but they're all internal people to assess each case, and then to come up with a payout, with a maximum payout of $50,000 at the time. Is that about right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And then your discovery was that this was all actually just a very, very intelligent way of saving money on their part through essentially screwing victims. Like really, they did not care in the least for the victims. They really just wanted them to go away. They wanted to pay them out and get them to go away. And unfortunately, part of the documentation, as I understand it, is that you're silenced after receiving your payout. Yeah, and you also said, am I right in remembering that Emma was given an offer, but you had an internal family conversation and persuaded her to hold off on accepting that, so that you could actually pursue a legal pathway.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and yeah, we weren't very popular for doing that because they wanted to contain it all. And before the Melbourne response started, the Premier of Victoria, was Jeff Kennett. He said to George Pell, when he first became Archbishop, he said, you fix this or I will with the Royal Commission. And both George Pell and Jeff Kennett have said in media that words to the same effect. One said one thing, one said the other. But so, you know, even politically, they knew it needed a Royal Commission. You know, fix this or there'll be a Royal Commission. So it was a threat. And yet, you know, it was placed, we were all placed back in the hands of the offending institution. How could that ever be a good thing?
Right.
Yet that's what happened. And it had no oversight, no appeal. No one looked at it, you know, no politician checked to see, oh, they're being treated fairly or not. We were just left to the guys that wanted to shut it down. And it was, and when you say $50,000 was the maximum, that's for the worst case. The average payout was $25,000. So it's peanuts. You know, even at the time, it was peanuts.
Yeah.
It was an insult, utter insult. Yeah.
You later estimated that through the Melbourne response, the Catholic Church had saved itself millions of dollars.
Yeah, what was it, 65 million or something? I remember that. Yeah, it was a front page article.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what it was all about, and that's what George Pell was all about. And yet somewhere along the lines, they said, oh, you know, you're the first one to do this. You should be praised for being the only one in the world to put this in place. But I think that was an afterthought. But the idea of it was to save money. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean you'd think that that's such a clear conflict of interest? I just find it staggering that the government supported it and didn't. I get that the structure of having the very organization that is, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
The Catholic Church is very, you know, strong politically. You know, they know politicians, got a finger in the pie. Look how much money they get. They get billions of dollars from the government, you know, from us every year. So, yeah, they just, I don't know what they do, but yeah, they have political influence.
Structurally
they
wrong.
Have political
No.
Yeah. So they get away with things like that because of that influence they have. But hopefully, you know, society knows more about it now, and it's
and that is a large part
It seems
your work.
Sorry, Sharon.
No, sorry. Go on, Sally.
Yeah, and I was just, what struck me there is that governments seem to have a very difficult time actually penetrating religious organizations and actually sort of, you know, investigating them. There's almost this sense of, oh, it's a religious organization. They're afraid to go in there, aren't they? Because of religious freedoms and not understanding, actually, lack of understanding of the dynamics of power and control that actually exist within a lot of religious institutions. And when we see it with cults that abuse children, and the authorities are aware of these organizations, and yet they stand by and do nothing about it. It's almost like we don't want to go there. That's too hard for us to go and try to sort of, it's too hard, it's too expensive, and particularly with something like the Catholic Church, which is so incredibly powerful worldwide, not just in Australia.
Yes, yeah. It's almost just listening to you speak reminds me of domestic violence a long time ago. The police used to think or say that's private matter, and they don't go there. And maybe the same awakening needs to happen with religious organisations, that maybe it's not all sweat, roses and
right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess we could now turn to your second book and what happened. So your own personal story you've shared. I mean, maybe just before we turn to your second book, is there anything else about your story and your family that you'd like to share?
I don't know. Just myself with what we achieved with the Royal Commission and the Victorian Parliamentary Inquiry, which was earlier than the Royal Commission. It was an amazing journey, and there are good people out there, and I'm just so glad I did all of what we did. Takes away from the suffering. The suffering was happening anyway, and it made it sort of worthwhile. I don't know what the word is, but it diminished the suffering by having something done about it rather than allowing it to continue, because how could I let that continue when I knew about what was going on? It had to be exposed, and that's what we did, and feel really good and proud about that, and proud of my girls. They've had a hard life, and we've all had a bad life. The Catholic hierarchy has taken away all of our lives in one way or another, all our lives.
Yeah. I sort of want to share for our audience that it's not to be underestimated, the impact that this has had on your lives and on countless other lives. It's not an exaggeration to say that your lives are ruined by this thing. Childhoods ruined, lives ruined, and to in all different kinds of ways, whether that be through the worst outcome of suicide, or just living for decades in shame and isolation, not being able to say out loud the words, it being unspeakable what had actually happened to these people. So I just want to emphasize that it really is life-ruining material, and I think all of us are grateful for the efforts that you put in afterwards. So now we can turn to that and discuss that, because that's a whole other chapter. But I just have one sentence that sort of sums it up that I recently heard, which is too horrific to imagine, but not too horrific to have happened. And that's kind of what happened to your children. So now turning to your life of activism afterwards. So just broadly speaking, doing the rough sketch, my understanding is that there was the Victorian Parliamentary Inquiry, which started first, which was just focused in Victoria. And was that just into the Catholic Church?
No, that was organisations, non-government organisations.
Okay. And that started, but then while that was still going, the Royal Commission started.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about how that all happened? Because, for those of us who are interested in making a difference, the pathway to making something like that happen is very important to us. So we'd love to hear, obviously you organized. You connected with other people and basically didn't stop pushing, right?
That's right, yeah. Well, it started with my first book. I wrote the first book, and at the launch of it, we had it at the local RSL, and invited all my friends. And there was one person who invited themselves because I didn't know them, and it was our local politician, Anne Barker. And she was connected with the RSL. I think she was maybe the secretary there or something. So she wanted to come to it. So she went to that book launch. And then I didn't meet her there or speak to her. And then a week later, I was walking down the street in Oakley, and she was on the other side of the road, and she stopped and she pointed over to me like that. I knew who she was. So I crossed, no, sorry, she was on the other side. So she came over the road to me, and she said, "We have to do something about this." Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, because I've been writing to politicians trying to get something done for quite a while, and with no action at all. But she'd read the book. She'd read it that night, finished it about 2 a.m. Oh, it read until 2 a.m. then finished it the next day, I think. So, and she was just hot to trot with it. And that was the beginning of a friendship with her and her activism. And she took it on, and no kidding, she spoke to so many politicians, every single one, and explained it all, went through, and if they had any questions or any, feelings that, oh, that's not true, or so, she sorted them all out. She spoke with them, and she was amazing. So she said, we're going to have a book presentation of my book to the Parliamentary Library, and we'll have a presentation in the Queen's Hall in Parliament House. So we did that and had speeches and all that. And then she left that and went into Parliament and addressed Parliament, saying that we need a state-led inquiry into the Catholic Church about child sexual abuse. So she spoke for 5 minutes and then came out. So that was April 2012. In April 2013, so 1 year later, there was an announcement that there'd be the Victorian Parliamentary Inquiry. In that 12 months, we'd met with the Attorney General once, but we found out on the day of the press conference that the Attorney General had been in negotiations with the Catholic Church, Catholic hierarchy, for 12 months. So the Secretary said 12 months, the Attorney General said 1 year. So they'd been in negotiations with the Church for 1 year. So it just seemed wrong, because here was the offender dictating to the government what sort of, inquiry would be. Would it be a judicial one, a Royal Commission, or a parliamentary one? So when it ended up being a parliamentary one, we thought, oh, well, this is the weakest one. They have chosen the weakest one so that it will fail. But also, just before the announcement, there was a big media campaign. I can't tell you how important the media is and was this area. They got to, and they published people's stories, and it went on and on and on. And there were 26 suicides that one policeman had reported up in Ballarat. And that was on the front page. It just went on and on and on. And that's why I'm sure they announced that inquiry at that time. So here we were with the parliamentary inquiry. So that was fantastic. And as it progressed, we learnt how devoted they were and keen and determined to get to the truth of the matter. The parliamentarians, who it was a multi-party, bipartisan group, and they were just amazing. They were really amazing in the work they did, the questions they asked. They were really good. But that was in the November of the same year. They announced the Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, announced the Royal Commission, and that was we were just overjoyed when we heard that. It was absolutely astounding. So just overjoyed. And we knew that one would be big and it would be more powerful because the parliamentary one didn't have a lot of powers to get documents. The church was resisting during the Victorian one because they'd deliver the documents the Friday afternoon before the hearing on Monday. So they were sabotaging it by not giving the politicians time to even look at them. You know, they had to do it on the weekend. They had, 2 days to do it, the whole lot. So, but the Royal Commission was a very different story. So we went through the Victorian one, and we went to every session, I think, except one half day that they held. And it's a big learning curve too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know, you feel full of compassion for the people who are speaking, and you get the bigger picture and you learn their experience, and then you can put together like a dossier almost in your head about the church behaviour, the hierarchies, behaviour and their agenda. So then it rolled on to the Royal Commission. Oh, it's just amazing, the power of the Royal Commission. It was a joy for people in our position to go from the very depth of despair and being trampled on and not being listened to when you're speaking the truth, to having us sort of lifted up, to our stories being valued and part of the evidence against the church, and them having the power to make those archbishops come in and speak and get their paperwork that they'd been hiding. I think most of it went over to the Vatican on the offender files, went over there, I believe. The secret archives, they're called. They've even got it in canon law. Anyway, and then to just sit through the hearings, the forensic examination of what they did, what they said, what happened next. You know, you wrote this here. What did you mean by that? To have them grilled on our behalf was just like heaven, I think. It was just amazing. So went to a lot of the Royal Commission hearings, not all of them because they were all over Australia. Went mostly to the ones in Sydney and Melbourne and Ballarat. But and others I listened to on webcasts. And I did.
Just so that our audience can understand the magnitude of what you did by attending the Royal Commission, could you speak to how many years the commission went on for, and just guess how many hours you spent attending hearings?
Well, it went on for 5 years, and we spent weeks and weeks and weeks in the courtroom. I was a witness as well to the Melbourne Archdiocese. No, it was Melbourne Response, actually. That hearing, I was a witness to that. That was really scary stuff. But I'd been waiting for a couple of decades nearly to have my day in court, and that was it. When I got the summons to appear, I framed it in a frame up there, hanging on my wall, like a trophy. Anyway, just an amazing experience. Yeah, it was just this, I don't know, wonderful forensic examination. No stone was
Left unturned.
unturned. It was just all a great thing.
They
Chrissie,
needed to.
sorry, I know I've mentioned this to you before, but for the sake of the interview and this recording, the Royal Commission just had such an enormous impact. And listening to you speak now, I can well appreciate the validation that it would have given you and Anthony and your whole family to be heard, to be believed. But there was another layer to it in that, like you said, it was a forensic. What I found so staggering about the commission was that it looked at obviously the crimes that had occurred, but then it looked at the way the organisations systematically covered it up, and what all of that. As you said, no stone was left unturned. They looked at what was in their rule books, whatever their canon law was. What were the mechanisms that allowed them to do this the way they had done it? What was the culture? So from the Jehovah's Witness part of it was case study 29 and case study 54. And that I just was overjoyed to see the commission dig into, can you actually leave the religion? What happens when you do? How are you treated? What do you have to do to go back? If you speak out, like they went into absolutely every detail. For ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, it was just so incredibly validating. And I did mention this to you, that since the Royal Commission, I have not met one single solitary ex-Jehovah's Witness that does not mention the Australian Royal Commission as being a substantial reason why they deconverted and left. And that's not just in Australia, I'm talking internationally. The Royal Commission had such far-reaching impact. So on behalf of all ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, Chrissie, thank you. Thank you for your tireless work, for your energy, for your courage, for your not giving up. Thank you, because you brought to light mechanisms of control and harm that the Catholic Church used, but that the Commission found copied in other religious groups.
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Sherry. It makes me feel special. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I can't wait to meet you one day. We're going to make that happen. Oh.
Yeah, I have to reflect that. I actually have a question for you, Chrissie. I'm not familiar with the Royal Commission's findings myself, but my background was in Mormonism. Do you recall any investigation and findings for Mormons?
No, I don't. Was there a hearing on the Mormons? I don't know. It doesn't ring a bell at all. I remember the Jehovah's Witnesses. I didn't go to one though. Yes.
But just for those who aren't clear, about what the Royal Commission was about, it was into various non-government institutions' responses to child sexual assault, right? Okay. Wow.
Far-reaching impact.
5 years. Yeah, the government showed that they do care about this issue. 5 years, and I think the budget was something like $500 million into the Royal Commission.
I was for
460 or something around there.
No, I can't remember now. I have got the statistics somewhere, but
it's on the website.
It was a lot of money. It came in under budget, which was good.
Yeah. So now, Sally-Ann, you've been quiet for a bit. Do you have any comments about the Royal Commission before we pepper Chrissie with more questions?
I'm actually curious to know, and for people who don't know much about the Royal Commission, what were the outcomes? What conclusions did they come to, Chrissie? Are you able to summarise that? I'm sure there was a lot.
I think the most important thing was the changes in law. Each state had to change its laws, not wasn't Commonwealth law, so it was, every state had to change, and I think most of them did. One of the significant law changes was in Victoria, and every state has done this now, was to break the seal of the confessional. So, you know, when laws come in, the church gets the first stabs, I think, and says, oh, well, you know, that's anti-religion or that affects us, so we want an exemption. So when it was brought in that mandatory reporting had to happen, then they said, oh, no, we can't do that because of confession. You know, we can't say that if it's confessed to us. So they got an exemption. So the law change was them losing that exemption. And I went into Parliament that day to listen because every 10 minutes, a different politician got up and said why the law should be changed, why they should lose that exemption. So every 10 minutes, this happened for basically a whole day, from about 10 o'clock on until a bell tolled somewhere at 5 p.m. and they just stopped. There were more that had to come, but they'd missed out. So every 10 minutes, for all those hours, a politician would get up and passionately say why this has to change to protect children. And I think there were 17 of them who got up because a bit earlier, the Archbishop of Melbourne had said that he'd rather go to jail than break the seal of the confessional. So about 17 different politicians got up and had a go at him for saying that. And it was just a joy to hear these men so passionate about this change. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. Not that the priests will do it, I suppose, because they've still got their thing, but it can come back to bite them later, because if they don't pass it on and a child's said that, and then later the child grows up and they can sue them. Yeah. So, but all these different law changes, you know, that they introduced, when you a child, when you're trying to, sorry, I can't think of the word.
It's okay.
Grooming. The grooming law came in, and that was during the Victorian parliamentary inquiry. But they started to do it change the laws in Victoria, and then they stopped. They just did that one. They stopped because they thought, well, the Royal Commission's going to do the same and recommend law changes. So they waited until the end of the Royal Commission. But all the recommendations from the Victorian parliamentary inquiry have been implemented. They're all in.
Okay.
And the Royal Commission ones are, I don't know, there was about 40 for the or 80 for the Commonwealth government. That was a national apology, which we had in 2018. And then there was the National Monument for victims. That's still in the pipeline. So they had some things they had to do, recommendations, but all the rest were for the state government, like, I don't know, something like 400 of them or so, for all the different state governments. And various states have implemented various law changes. But basically a big change to protect children, and also the education that the Royal Commission and the Victorian Inquiry gave to society, because it was Peter McClellan, the head of the Royal Commission. He said, laws don't change themselves. The laws don't change unless the people want that change. We have to educate the people in this Royal Commission to get the law changes. So that's what they did. And what an education it was. It was amazing.
Incredible. Oh my gosh. And one further question that I have from that. What do you believe the impact of the Royal Commission has been on the Catholic hierarchy?
I think they've lost a lot of credibility. I think they've lost people attending their churches big time. I don't know what effect it has had, because these men accepted what was going on. They did nothing to stop it. And so how can they now manage this properly?
Yeah.
You know, how do you get to be like that in the first place? And have they changed? I don't know. It's a big question mark. Are they just going to revert back to how they were when it all cools down? I don't know. And also, there should be some sort of punishment for the hierarchy. You know, they have just walked away scot-free from what they managed, what they allowed to happen by moving offenders on. And this is the case because when a priest is moved, the priest doesn't say, I'm moving here, I'm going to, you know, another suburb. They're not allowed to do that. They are placed there. And the only moves that they can get is via, the archbishop is the only one who can move them, or the bishop in a diocese. So all these moves after complaints about child sexual abuse have gone through, and the hierarchy have made those transfers happen without any restrictions on what they're doing. So they know what's happened, and they've done nothing to stop it or help stop it. And there were cases of that in the Royal Commission, evidence that came out in their testimonies as well as written stuff. So where is the punishment for that to make them not do it in the future? I mean, they can have a go at the individual paedophiles and take them to court. That's one aspect of it. But what about the guys who, you know, prolonged this offending, who did nothing to stop these crimes? You know, they've just walked away.
Yeah.
I know the National Redress Scheme is an attempt to try to make the organisations accountable, but that depends on the organisation participating in the redress scheme, and that the organisation was investigated by the Commission. So it's not a cover-all. It doesn't. So, Sean, if someone came forward with a claim against the Mormons, if the Mormons weren't investigated at the Commission, then there is no mechanism in Australia, at least, through the redress scheme, to get any accountability from the organisation. At least as far as I know in Australia. I do know in the US that there are cases now against organisations for covering up and for not managing the situation as they should have, but that's the US.
Yeah, but I think that's what should happen. They should be punished for the cover-up. And if, you know, Archbishop Little did that, but I didn't. You know, if there's that sort of army thing where, I was just obeying orders, therefore I'm not responsible, then there should be some sort of organisational punishment, like the loss of tax exemption, tax-free existence on the worst offenders. You know, there's like the St. John of God's. They had like a 40% offending rate and a 70% or so complaint rate about their members. That's huge. So what's wrong with them losing their tax-free status? I mean, if you commit a crime, supposedly, then the charity loses its tax-free existence. So there's a law there saying that. So why doesn't it happen? Can't that happen for the worst offenders? Not the whole Catholic Church, but these ones the Christian brothers and the Benedictine monks, ones like this that have big time offenders there. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, sadly, it seems that the one thing that the Catholic Church understands is money. And when it's fined or its finances are threatened, then it actually starts to take action. We see the same with many religions, that what they really, really understand is money. So, so am I right in understanding beyond the redress scheme, there was no actual fine imposed on the Catholic Church at any point?
Nothing. No, that's sort of what I'm saying. You can take to court the offender,
Yeah.
but the mastermind who moved them around, like that offender couldn't do anything if he wasn't in a parish.
Enabled.
Enabled to, new start, new group of kids, new parishioners who know nothing, and then he just starts again. They did that, and there's been no punishment for it. There's a big gap there.
So there's more work to do.
I'll do it again. What's it? Nearly 2,000 years they've had this history, and they're incapable of stopping it themselves. So someone has to. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's a good description of some of the knock-on effects. I did want to take just 1 second to unpack the confessional seal, because some people may not be familiar with the significance of that. So I'll explain it as I understand it, that sometimes a priest who had abused a child would confess that to one of their leaders, seeking forgiveness. And the confessional seal is that that conversation is confidential. But now, and so they would have no obligation to actually share that with the police, but now it's illegal to not disclose that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Anything said in the confessional is supposed to be secret for anyone. But yeah, they were hiding offending priests by hearing their confession and saying nothing about it. Also, if there's a good priest and the pedophile priest confesses to that good priest, then that good priest is silenced. There's that side of it as well, like a blackmail thing.
Yeah. And you gave an example in one of your books about how cavalier the abuser was about that confessional silence, just basically confessing. And what did he do as he was walking away from the confession?
Yeah, it was laughing, I think.
Laughing, yeah.
You also spoke about this is part of the infrastructure of the church to protect itself and keep what's happening hidden. Mental reservation. I'd like you to explain what that is and how it's used.
Okay, it's been dubbed lying without lying. So the priests teach this to themselves, and you can, it's virtually leaving some of the story out, leaving a fact out that makes the person think something else. Like one example they gave was that a nuisance parishioner came to the presbytery and wanted to speak to the parish priest, but the assistant priest went to the door, and he knew the parish priest didn't want to talk to this guy. So the assistant priest said to the parishioner, "Oh, well, Father O'Donnell is not in." So it mentally reserves the rest of the sentence, saying, "Not into you." So he doesn't want to see you. But yeah, they can use it a lot, and it was brought up at the Royal Commission because they have secret oaths oath of office, all these sorts of things that gives them the right to lie under oath in a court. So Peter McClellan, the Royal Commissioner, in one, might have been, one case study, might have been the Ellis defence one, I think it was, went right into it. And who did they have to get permission to speak freely in court from? Some had to get permission from George Pell to speak freely. That's when he was Archbishop of Sydney. Others had to go to the, the representative of the papal nuncio in Canberra. So they, before they could tell the truth under oath in a court of law, they had to get permission to tell that truth. Yeah. So mental reservation was brought up in that, or not that case, it was one of the Ballarat cases, but it did come up in the Royal Commission. It's just leaving out facts that make someone think something else. It's pretty pathetic, but they can do that.
My impression, having read Still Standing, was that your advocacy, you dug down into understanding and learning about how the Catholic Church operated. You went through canon law. Like, you became an expert. You are an expert on how the church actually works. And my impression was that you shared all of that knowledge with the Commission. You educated them because they weren't going to get that education from the church. The church wasn't going to reveal its tactics. But you learned all of that. You got into the weeds and really rooted it all out and dug it all out. And again, this is another thing I want to thank you for. Because you did that, you educated the Commission so that they could find the same mechanisms elsewhere. Because the Jehovah's Witnesses have mental reservation as well. They call it different, though. They call it theocratic warfare. But it's doing exactly the same thing. It's actually a little bit more, it's hiding the truth, it's omitting, but in some cases, it's outright lying. But it is given complete, right? Any incriminating information, they say it's for those who are entitled not to know. And because they have a very black and white, everything outside of the organisation is satanic because it's worldly, they therefore are not entitled to know. So you can lie, no problem at all. And the Commission fossicked that out, found out about theocratic warfare, and made them answer to that on the stand.
Well done. Yeah.
So again, I'm going to thank you for that, because it's part of, it's the same, it's a copybook, right? It's the tactics are used across all of these different groups. I was staggered when the Commission did that. I was like, how did they find out about that? Amazing.
Oh, great. Well, I know bits of canon law. I don't know all of it. It's over 1,000 pages, but there are laws that I've gone into that are relevant to this issue. So, a bit. Some of them I can quote off the cuff. But anyway.
I bet you've become that familiar with it, but I am in awe of your tenacity and resilience to dig at that level. Like I personally, I can't read Jehovah's Witness stuff. It distresses me too much. I just can't. But you went there, and what a legacy! What an incredible body of work! It's just wow.
Thanks, Sherry. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I just look back on it and I think, it was like warfare. It's like warfare. And then they'd make announcements, and then we had to counter the announcements because, they were wrong. They were misleading or whatever. So, it was a real war game, I think.
Yeah. One of my favourite quotes of yours in Still Standing was you said, I am the monster they created.
Yeah.
I love that line. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I liked it too.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, they created the monster
Yep.
by being what they were,
Yep.
what they are.
Well, I think that we've got a lot of wonderful material here, and if it's all right with everyone, I just wanted to move on to some final questions that we've prepared for you. Does that work with everyone?
Yep.
Yeah. So, in preparation for this interview, I prepared a set of questions. Sherry, you may have a set too, I'm not sure.
I've
Are there
covered
any
some
other
of
questions
it.
beyond? Okay,
I've
great.
covered some
Great.
of it already, but I do have one, yes. But you go
Okay,
first.
okay. Well, okay, I'll go first. I'm very excited to ask you these questions since I've actually since reading both of your books. So, my first question for you, Chrissie, is about the prevalence of childhood sexual assault in Australia today. So you mentioned in Still Standing that children raised in environments where Catholic priests have full access to them are basically in a game of roulette. After all you've learned about it and the findings of the Royal Commission and how that's been implemented, I know this is a difficult question to answer, but what are the typical chances of someone being assaulted if you attend a Catholic school in 2024 and beyond?
Well, I don't know. I think the priesthood is a dying thing. There's not a lot of priests around. I hope that the teachers and other people in that environment are aware and would be looking for something, or that would prig their consciousness to see certain things. I don't know, but that it really is difficult because it's unseen. It's an invisible crime. It does not happen in front of us. So all you're left with are symptoms in children and behaviour in offenders. So that's all you got. And that was my hope in my first book, to talk about all that stuff so that to enable people to be able to pick up on certain things. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine, but it's still a non-negligible chance. It's not as if the problem has entirely disappeared. Yeah.
Well, I go back to them in the first place. They allowed this to happen. That was their MO. That was to cover up. It was their MO to offend like that. It was their MO to think nothing of that offending, to let it continue. This is them. This is the priesthood. This is where they've come from. It's been their history for 2,000 years nearly. That's been recorded. I mean, how do you change that? It needs a huge overhaul. Yet at the end of the Royal Commission, with all the archbishops, they were still saying, oh, well, we didn't stop it because we didn't understand the effect it would have. I mean, what the hell? You got to wait to know the effects of when the child grows up, the effects that it had to say to that guy back 10 years ago, oh, you shouldn't have done that. I mean, any normal human being would say, no, this is wrong, stop that.
Yeah.
Help the child, protect the child. But no, these guys just let it continue. I mean, what do you do with that? How do you change that? Oh, that's right, the Royal Commission. They're just defending themselves. And 3 of them said that stupid thing about them, oh, they didn't know the effects it would have. When they say that, they are admitting they know that it was happening. They're admitting they did nothing. And and they've been saying that for, about 30 years. It's as though someone in the Vatican came up with this good idea. Oh, everyone say this. We didn't understand the effect it would have at the time. So that's what they say. But they're just shooting themselves in the foot, and I don't know why no one doesn't challenge them on that.
Yeah.
So that's them. I mean, and what have we got? They're a dying breed. There's less of them now, but they're getting some from overseas, and I just don't know. I really don't know. It's just a big question mark.
Right.
You know, and are they going to put in the right stops and think, you know, can they be trusted to do the right thing and protect children now? Well, how can they with that history? It's not all new people. They didn't sack them all and get a whole new bunch. And I think part of them was to maintain that situation. I don't know why, but there's examples of, I only know of two priests who, one went to the police and one went to the local media to out pedophile priests. So those two guys faced, you know, hell over what they'd done. Their archbishops or bishops threw them out of the diocese or the archdiocese, or made their life misery because they had gone to the police or gone to the media and exposed the truth. So, and both of them suicided, supposedly. This is what happened to them. So they're the good guys that tried to help. And the whole system of the priesthood turned against them. They were the good guys. So
Wow.
I don't know what you do with that. And has it changed? Who knows?
Yeah.
No idea.
Wow.
I don't even go there.
Wow.
But that culture, that background, that habit, that is them. And I don't know why, but there they are. And that's what the research done by a Queensland doctor was her thesis, I think. And she put all the information from the Victorian Parliamentary Inquiry and the Royal Commission on Victoria into a computer program that analyses, you know, the mafia and bikie gangs and drug cartels and makes all connections and things. So she put all this information in to the computer, and she found that there were 16 pedophile rings in Victoria. And, you know, they're at various schools and places. That's astounding. And
Wow.
one of the places was Vasily Muchins is the name of the researcher. One of them was at the Salesian College in Sunbury, Rupertswood. So, and I know from media and over the years, there's been 9 pedophile priests and brothers at the one school that have been convicted. So there's probably more, but that's 9 at one school. So that was one of the pedophiles that she identified, pedophile rings that she identified. But, you know, it's organised. It's not just, you know, coincidence or...
Yeah, it's not just a few bad apples, as they
No,
say. Yeah.
no, that's wanton.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know why they're like that, but this is what has been shown.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. So just to reflect that back, and in summary, the problem is still there, or it's extremely likely to be there. And for those who have children attending Catholic schools where priests are revered and worshipped as the next thing, you know, just under God, where they have unlimited access to children to sort of pull them out of class, say, I want them to do some job or any other kind of access. The summary is that there is still risk in 2024 and beyond. What has changed with the Royal Commission and all the other actions that we've taken is just there's a lot more awareness around, but it's certainly not the case that everybody knows. And I've spoken with people who I actually have a friend that I've speaking to just the last few days, and they just got their child signed up to go to a Catholic school. And after having read your books, I just told her, are you aware of this? Are you aware of the Royal Commission? Are you aware of that these things have happened? And no, they have absolutely no idea about any of this. So that's why we're here, to spread further awareness, because I think the way I see it is that we are society's immune system. Like, we need to work to get rid of this problem. And I have to say, to carry the analogy further, Chrissie, your books were kind of like a flu jab. It hurt for a while. It really hurt reading them, and it sure was painful to sit with all that. But it's a very important action as part of the immune system. Yeah.
That's an amazing analogy. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Yeah. So we keep fighting this problem.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the sorry, Sean, I know you had another couple of questions, but I guess
Okay.
I had a question that's sort of related to what we've been talking about. I suppose where I'm kind of left with this, I don't understand. I can't understand. I can't get my head around how people continue being part of the Catholic Church when they do know what has occurred, and when they do know about the Royal Commission, and they do know about the culture of the Catholic Church and the hierarchy and what has happened. Can you shine any light on that at all, Chrissie, around your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, my thoughts are that they can't think freely because they've been brainwashed when they were young, although I don't know about young people today. But, like I said before, the priest is their way to get to heaven.
Yeah.
The church rules have made that the case. So if you're a Catholic, they are the rules, and you can't go to heaven unless you go to Mass and confession, and they're the only people who can do that. So I suppose maybe it goes in the too hard basket in their head, like, well, it's better to ignore it than confront it, face it. But because they've got to ask, well, what was God doing when, my child was being raped? That sort of thing. Where was God? Why didn't a piano fall on the guy's head? He's a priest and he's doing this. So it's raises, I think, a lot of questions that are quite deep in your faith. That, why didn't God do something? Because a lot of the teachings are, God will protect you, and you pray, and you'll be looked after, and you're the chosen one, or whatever they say. And then suddenly God let this happen. There's a lot of questions there that don't make sense and might be better off not asking. I don't know, it might be some of that.
Yeah. I'm struck by it's the too hard basket, in a way, where I think, unfortunately, a lot of people live in the too hard basket, live that way of avoiding things that are just hard to think about and hard to face. And I guess the other thing is, if a person isn't directly affected by it, then I think often there's this sense of, oh, well, that wouldn't happen to me or my family. It happens to other people, but it doesn't happen to me. And that happens to me.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a fair bit of it as well. Or it's not this priest because I know him and I trust him. It'll be that parish over there or that priest there, not here.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even a desire to believe that it's been dealt with now. It doesn't happen anymore. That was then, this now. Yeah.
And the church keeps saying that, I suppose, the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Chrissie. Yeah.
That raises something for me, because the commission was my Jenga brick that made me deconvert. When others found out about that, I would get asked the question, does that mean you were abused? and I wasn't. But
Mm.
why does it have, why do you have to think that as if that somehow, are you demeaning or belittling that person's experience and saying, well, because that happened to you, of course you lost your faith or you left then? There's something not right with that rationale and that thinking, that there has to be a reason why someone has gone and no longer believes in that particular religion or whatever the case might be. That just, the thinking is distorted. It's not sound.
Well, I suppose they're still in the zone that you wouldn't leave because, you know, you're going to go to heaven and all that sort of thing. I suppose it's just you've got to have some reason to leave, not just no reason.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So just one thought about the mechanisms by which this continues. Like why does this happen and why does this continue to happen? So we're speculating about that. And I have one from attachment theory, which is a turn toward response. So the moment that a victim comes to someone, whether that be a parent or a trusted anyone who they trust really, and says, this happened to me, or the moment that we talk about this issue, we're trying to raise awareness and we say, this is happening. We have a choice. Do we turn toward the victim and acknowledge and listen and move forward together in an engaged relationship with awareness of what they're going through? Or do we turn away? And I think in many instances, people, the hierarchy certainly is habitually turning away from the suffering that's being created. But also, as I shared, there's that layer of other people who are also turning away in their own way, saying that couldn't happen. So I think you share some examples in your book where people would approach their parents, your children would approach their parents, say something bad happened, and the parents would say, no, that could never happen, right? So it taught me the importance of turning towards victims when they come to us and listening.
Very important, yes. And something I've come to understand recently is that disclosure is basically a lifelong process. That it comes out in bits and pieces over quite a long time. It's very difficult for a young person to come out and say what's happened. The younger they are, the harder it is to find the right words. And just even an adult, they'll say a little bit and I suppose test the waters to see if you'll believe or who will believe. And then later, years later, they'll say a bit more. So it's just something that recently I've understood. I knew it, but I never put it in words. And then someone did. But that needs to be common knowledge in the judiciary. Lawyers need to know it, need to be taught it. Because now if they say something and then later say something else, a bit more, add to it, oh, well, you're lying because you didn't, why didn't you say it before? So it really needs to be known that it doesn't just come easy, that they say it all. It's complex.
If people don't feel safe or believed, then they won't share those really harrowing details because it's so painful to speak about it. Yeah. And thank you. So I do have, are we still okay for time? I have 5 more questions, but then I promise after that I will be done. Yeah. So I have 2 sections of questions. The first is questions for advice for survivors, and then the second is about advocacy. So firstly, advice for survivors. Chrissie, if there are any survivors of childhood sexual assault listening, what advice would you give them, both personally for their own mental health and financially in terms of seeking restitution?
Well, I think I'd suggest counselling for survivors, to have someone to talk about it. It's a very difficult thing to do, but you need to speak to a trauma-informed counsellor and I think they're taught how to deal with it all. And financially, I would seek out a lawyer to find out if you have a case before you went into any of the financial redress schemes, because the law's changing, the courts are changing, and it's really progressing. And there's some fair payouts now, which never existed before. So before you go down the track of redress, try that, just to get an opinion on it.
Thank
Good
you.
advice.
Wonderful. And then, okay, and then actually I could skip that next word. So advocacy, 3 questions. One, what can the rest of us do for survivors of childhood sexual assault if we want to make a difference?
I think keeping the conversation alive. You probably often heard that when someone speaks about it, then others come forward. And that is the case, because they're freed from their thoughts that they're the only one. So there's others. So they gain some confidence, I suppose, to speak, because being the only one is very isolating. But that's what pedophiles do. They even twist it around, saying it's the child's fault, or you made me do it, or you enjoyed that, so that the child feels even worse about it. And then there's other threats like, oh, if you tell your mum, she'll die of a heart attack, or what other nasty thing they can think of. So the whole thing is to maintain the silence of the child, because with that silence, they can continue the offences and offending against other children. So it really plays to them to have that silence. And, if the silence is the toxic thing, then speaking out is the cure, because you've got to do what they don't want, which is not keep their secret. And it's not good for you either. It's their crime. It's their problem. It's not yours. You need to be free of it. And I think that, you have a life, and you need to live that life, and don't let whoever's done this offending take any more of your life than they already have. If you have to come out and fight about it, then do that, but step back when you have to, and forget about it. So
Wonderful. Thank you. So don't let this issue sit in silence. Don't let people sit in silence alone in their homes for decades with the shame and the isolation that came from this trauma. Keep the conversation alive, and be prepared to compassionately witness people when they come forward with their disclosures. Don't turn away from people when they come forward. Don't pretend that the issue doesn't exist. And if you have the strength to be here as part of the conversation, then be here as part of it.
Good on you. In a nutshell. Well done, Sean.
Very well said.
Thanks. Okay, so 2 more questions about advocacy. The first is, would we be right? I'm sure I know the answer to this one, but would we be right in understanding that the best way to change churches and institutions that are not getting it is through the media and public pressure, and that private conversations with them go nowhere?
Absolutely. They have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, which is don't talk about it, and their money. There's a lot for them not to stir up anything, people's reputations, to one person that's causing this. You're going against the flow. So, yeah, I'd go outside that circle and, yeah, maybe start with a counsellor. I don't know. It just, yeah, ours, the way ours went, yeah.
Everything in your experience pointed to them not being able to respond to it properly, and exactly the opposite.
Yeah. I knew they were going to do nothing to protect children.
Yeah.
And also, it's like having this big secret that I don't want to keep, as in I know what was happening, in our case, in our family's case. And therefore, I have sort of evidence that this is what they do and have been doing. And I couldn't be silent about that. I had to, talk about it, confront it, challenge them, because I knew after seeing George Pell that they weren't going to do anything to stop it. That was in 1996. Yeah.
Oh, great. And then my final question is, as you are going into retirement from advocacy work, or as you already have, what advice do you have for the next generation of advocates, people like us, who are ready and eager to carry the baton further?
Well, I think a lot of base work has been done, and I think the Royal Commission is such a pedestal to stand on. It's just a treasure trove of evidence and interviews, all sorts of things to propel forward this issue. And I think a lot of people at universities, they're doing a lot of study and research from the Royal Commission. So things are happening on that level. I know that for a fact. And yeah, just it's got to keep going and keep the conversation alive. Do what you can when you can, and just be very aware, because this crime is, all the paedophiles didn't die yesterday. They're still there, and we have to be aware of that. And I think as languages change, words change in meaning, they adapt and use better words and things to help hide themselves. So we must always be on the cutting edge to understand that and keep ahead of it, or just keep up with it. We're ahead, but just to try and deal with it.
I think
Wonderful. Thank you.
an area that you've identified through this conversation that that we can work on, because we know there's more work that has to be done, is challenging the government, challenging the ACNC, the Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, to question continuing to give tax-exempt status to organisations that are doing this. I think that's come through to me clearly this morning, that that's an area that we still need to work on.
Well, I've got a letter in with the Attorney General, Federal Attorney General at the moment, on that issue, and others. I met with him, I don't know, over a year ago. Anyway, I'm still waiting to hear back, so very disappointing. But yeah, if it comes from another area, and the law was that if the charitable institution breaks the law, then they lose their tax-free status. And if this doesn't count, then what law do they have to break to, lose their status?
Right.
It makes a mockery of the law, doesn't it? For them still to be in operation. And what I suggested was just the biggest offending brotherhoods, or whatever they were. So I don't see why the argument wouldn't be to do that, but they're just so powerful, you see. They have a lot of sway, even after everything.
Even after
even
everything.
after everything.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's it for my questions. So Sherry and Sally, do you have any questions before we wrap up?
I have one question for Chrissy, and it's quite a personal question, I guess. There was a sentence in your book, Hell on the Way to Heaven, that I read, that you wrote after you found out about the abuse of your girls. You said, "Peace of mind left me instantly, and I have not known it since." That really cut deep when I read that. And I wonder, do you have peace of mind these days? Is that something you experience, or is it just as
Um,
it was in the past?
oh, no, I have, I suppose, a certain degree of peace. I think the Royal Commission, when that finished during its hearings, that was peace, a form of peace.
Mm,
But, just uh, looking at our life and all the damage done and the losses, the
mm,
losses of so many things, people, and I just think, uh, yeah, all I have to do is think of that, and the peace of mind goes. So I try and keep a balance in
yeah,
um, thinking, managing my thoughts, I suppose, because, like I said before, I don't want them to take any more from my life than they've already taken. And if I
yeah,
do let that happen, then they win.
mm,
I want them to win. As
yeah,
far as I'm concerned, I've won this, victims, survivors have won this um,
yeah,
battle. And we had a Royal Commission, and it was just astounding. So, yeah, so it's a mixture, I suppose. Mixed.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
I like I've got so many questions, but I'm so grateful for the time that you've already been so generous in giving us. So I'm going to just condense it to one. What's life like for you now, with everything that you've gone through, all that you've accomplished? You've shared your mental struggle just now, and not allowing them to win. You win. Where do you find your joy, and how is life for you now?
Well, I have two grandchildren, which is wonderful. I still have two daughters, which is wonderful as well. I have amazing friends who have supported me and Anthony the whole time, the last 30 years or so. Um, I go out, I enjoy myself a bit. I have a pretty quiet life, I suppose, but enjoy seeing my friends and family. But at the same time, or on at a parallel, there's all the hurt as well. And sometimes I think about that. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, but most of the time I don't let it, because it could be terrible, you know, but I don't let it. So I don't know. It's just a real mix of um, wanting to make it through without um, more damage being done. So I don't know how to say it. But yeah, no, I have a good time and I have a bad time, but most of it's good time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, just huge fan, and I find your strength and resilience just so incredibly inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes I don't feel that, but no, but I can look back sometimes and see our achievements, and
Yeah,
yeah, really so proud I've done that. The alternative would be to have said nothing, to have done nothing. and I probably would have shriveled up and died, I think. But, you know, I feel like I've done good. I feel like I've moved things along on this crime and maybe educated people a bit through my books and the Royal Commission that a lot of us were asking for and we got eventually has been just an amazing process, and like it's there forever, I suppose. And I went over to a SNAP conference, I don't know, a few years ago now, and also made a documentary with Paul Kennedy, an ABC documentary called Undeniable. And that's why I went to the SNAP conference, because they were going to show it over there. And the constant thing we got, response was in America that they wanted one too, that the SNAP people who were attending, it was like the Australia and our Royal Commission was the envy of over there. And it was a really inspiring moment to, you know, be there and hear that and to show our documentary as well. So it was great moment.
It must contribute some significant portion to your healing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the word, I think, healing.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of healing, yeah. And I think I've done enough healing to deal with all those negative things that have happened. And also in having this progress means that all those bad things have been negated to a certain extent, or the pain that has not been wasted, because there's a better outcome than doing nothing, which is what we've got. So society's got. Yeah.
You've honored your grief and pain by taking action for all these years.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's been good. I can tell you that. It's a good feeling to have done what I've done and, you know, change laws. And, you know, who would have thought, you know, I'm just a housewife mother from Oakley. And, yeah, you know, I suppose it shows what, you know, you can do if you, you know, start out to do that. And so many good people came to our assistance and our rescue and our aid. You know, it was because I think like-minded people want this to stop.
Yeah.
They don't like it either. And once they find out, then this is terrible, because, you know, most parents, if, you know, say, talk about, you know, if they touch my child, I'll kill them. You know, that's the depth of feeling about that. So I knew if I tapped into that, because that's a natural thing for parents, that there's going to be a whole, you know, most of society is going to understand that and demand better. So that's what I worked on, and yeah, worked.
Wow. Yeah. Wonderful. So I think as we wrap this up, maybe just give all three of us, Sherry, myself, Celia, and one last spot for reflection, just a few minutes or whatever you'd like to say. So I'll start out. Chrissie, it's been deeply inspirational for me to become aware of your work. I read both of your books, and like Sherry shared in one of our private chats, there were moments that I had to take some breaks while reading your books because I was so connected to the grief and the sadness that you'd expressed in those books. In particular, in Hell on the Way to Heaven, you were describing the scene on the train where you were holding Emma, like you had when she was a baby. And I was doing some housework at the time. I just had to stop and sit down and just feel that, because it was so powerful what you were feeling. So I've found this journey with you sort of catching up to your work by reading those books deeply inspirational, and would like to say that we're here with you in your grief. We're also here with you in your activism. in solidarity to all the work that you've done. And we're here with you in the journey of healing from the damages and harms done by religion. And that's the explicit purpose of the nonprofit that we're a part of. And we're also here with you in the solace and consolation and the sense of peace that may come as you integrate both sides, right? The grief that is always there, as you've expressed in your book, but then also the comfort in knowing that you did all that you could to take action on that. And so I think I speak for all of us when I say we're deeply grateful for your work.
Thanks, Sean. Make me feel teary. Thank you. Lovely words. Thank you.
Sally Ann, do you want to go?
Yeah, Chrissie, I'd just like to say thank you as well. It's been an absolute privilege and an honor to spend this time with you. It almost feels like any words don't really express what I want to say, or how I felt when I read your book, and the depth of grief that I have felt for you and for your family. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you have done in this area, for the difference that you have made. And I think what strikes me is it's not just a difference that you have made in what you have done, but how that has changed the course of history, and that has changed individuals' lives. And that is significant because, as we know, every single person is valuable and is important and is part of a wider network of relationships and family and community and nations. And so that, I guess, you will probably never know the full impact of the work that you and Anthony have done together, and the impact of your family's lives. And as you say, you talk about yourself being just an ordinary person, and it's the extraordinary work that you have done because of that passion and that rage that has motivated you to do that. I think the other thing that I want to say to you as well is take care of yourself. There's that sense that we've spent almost 3 hours talking about this. You've spent this time reflecting on this and talking about it. And I don't know how often you do that these days. But I just wanted to say, please take care of yourself, and know that we're here to support you in that, and know that we are with you and we stand with you in that. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Sally Ann. That's beautiful words, and I wish you all the best in your endeavours as well. Amazing what you're doing to provide for people who are, in a very terrible situation, to put out a lifeline to them. Very important work.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
I think, as you can probably see, Chrissie, we're all a little bit overwhelmed, and it's just been such a privilege to spend this time with you, and I'm overcome. I'm just incredibly grateful for all that you have done, all that Anthony has done, and as Sally Ann and Sean have said, your life story, your family story, the to have lost Anthony, just the grief, it's just incredible. Your life is amazing, what you have gone through and what you have turned it into. And I'm just repeating what Sean and Sally Ann have already said, is just, you have made such an incredible impact internationally, globally.
That's amazing.
You really have. And just, we are extremely grateful. And I find it a reason for hope, actually, that individuals like yourself took on the might and the power of a 2,000-year-old institution and did not let it defeat you. I find that just so truly, inspiring. I keep saying that, but I can't think of a better word. You weren't defeated by it at the outset. You were like, no, we're taking this on. That gives me so much hope. As a human species, that we can make change happen. We don't have to allow adversity and crime and these terrible things that can happen defeat us. We can make a change. We can make a difference, even in the face of extraordinary odds. And your story says that loud and clear.
Great. And one thing, I feel that I didn't have a choice in it. It's just something I had to do. It was very natural. It just was. And a power to be reckoned with. It was not something that was decided. It just had to happen.
Yep.
So thank you all. It's lovely spending this time with you and answering your questions. I hope it goes well and it's okay. So thank you all.
I'm sure it will be. And I would love to keep in touch with you. And when I get myself down to Melbourne one day.
Yes, we'll have to meet, all of us, if you're down this way. Yeah, just you got my email, so just let me know. It'd be lovely to catch up.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. And I hope it goes far and wide and provides help to someone, because that's what it's all about, is about helping those who have suffered and also trying to save those in the future. So worthwhile.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it's all about. Yeah.
I can just imagine, as we were closing, like I have this image in my mind that, it's Sunday today, tomorrow morning, in some Catholic school somewhere in Australia, some 7-year-old child is playing, and whereas 30 years ago, there may have been a priest walking past at that very moment. Now, because we are more aware as a society, because the teachers are more aware, or the principal is more aware, or whatever, now that priest isn't walking past the playground tomorrow.
Hopefully,
and that just that just ties it in my mind. That one image just sums it up, and they may never know your name or the work that you and the other commissioners have done, but nonetheless they're playing safely in the playground and there's no priest inside.
What a wonderful thought.
Sean, you're going to make me cry. That's a beautiful image to end on. That's just that's gorgeous.
It is. It used to be when I'd drive past a primary school and the kids were out playing, I always cried every time because of what happened. But now I feel better about that.
Wonderful. Well, Chrissie Foster, it's been a huge privilege for us to have so much of your time. Thank you. And I just want to thank all of our listeners for following us through this whole interview and making it to the end. And hope they can keep in touch with your work, and please look forward to more interviews in future. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining us today for RfR Stories Australia. We hope you enjoyed the program. We'd like to let you know about a number of resources that Recovering from Religion has to support you through your journey. On our website, recoveringfromreligion.org, you'll find 1. A resources tab, which contains an entire library of resources and links covering a wide range of relevant topics. 2. Other online media, including a blog, other podcasts, and RFRX talks. 3. A helpline that is available 24/7, both through phone call or live chat, where you can talk with someone supportive in real time in a time of crisis, or if you simply want to connect with someone who will understand with empathy. 4. Support groups, which run both online and in person in certain locations around the world. And 5. A directory of therapists who have been vetted and offer only therapeutic services using secular methods. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.